What is up, basketball fans? We're back again with another live NBA outlet. We are now previewing this year's free agent point guard class. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory Waldron, and pretty much another co-host on the show, Jack Manuel. Guys, how we doing?
I can smell Kory's gym stank all the way in the southern hemisphere.
Yeah, let me give everybody a little whiff.
Oh God.
Yeah, this is
laptop just broke.
It's the day of podcasting, right? So now we're doing some free agency previews.
And as always, check us out, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, TGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, and YouTube. Like Kory mentioned, we just did one previously, breaking down the Anthony Davis trade to the Lakers. Obviously, this point guard class could have an impact on that trade in terms of who the Lakers try to sign. And starting off with the top of the class, and I think he's a clear-cut, number one point guard of this class, Kyrie Irving. Give me a little bit of an overview of what he brings to a team in the season he just had.
I mean, he didn't have the best season. He had a nice regular season and then sort of filtered out a little bit in the playoffs. He had a good couple of series. He was okay against Indiana, but then when it came against Milwaukee, he was lackluster to say the least. So, Kyrie Irving leading his own team, this is what he wanted. He said that he wanted to re-sign if the fans would have him. A lot of time changed throughout the season. It was tumultuous. He's just a weird dude. If you guys follow Kyrie Irving on Instagram, just look at everything that he likes. And I'm just like, dude, what goes in your brain? But on the basketball court, what goes on his brain is even more fascinating because that dude has some of the slickest handles going around. He's finishing around the basket. He is a very slick shooter from the perimeter as well, one of the best point guards in that area. And where he lands at free agency could dictate a lot of things going forward. Obviously, there's a lot of rumors surrounding the Brooklyn Nets. The Knicks are around the wings. Does he end up re-signing in Boston? It seems unlikely. And then obviously the Los Angeles Lakers, after just landing Anthony Davis, you get your third star in Kyrie Irving. Then that completes the picture. So plenty of stuff surrounding Kyrie Irving, but his season was subpar by his own lofty standards.
So what you're getting with Kyrie Irving, you're getting an NBA champion first off. You're getting a guy who can go out there and get you buckets. He is still in my eyes, one of the most clutch players we have in the NBA when it comes to winning time. I think about that game against the Raptors where he went off late. I think about the game-winning layup he had against the Pacers during the regular season as well. This is a guy who goes out there and gets you buckets. He was also a plus defender this year for we had the debate, me and Jack, on this outlet at one point between Lillard and Irving. I think Lillard finished the year probably a better overall point guard. But Kyrie was just a decent defender this year too. I think for the Celtics, he was like second or third in deflections. He was a little bit more aggressive. So you like to see that. Does that translate to wherever he goes next? You hope so. Like you mentioned, Jack, ridiculous handles, probably in the top 3 of dribblers that we have in the league and crossovers. An all-around fantastic player that every single team besides the Celtics would love to have as their starting point guard.
Yeah, I think you look at it, Jack mentioned it wasn't his best season, but he still put up 23, 7, and 5 on 48% from the field and 40% from 3. And like Kory mentioned, kind of improved from that defensive standpoint. Still not amazing and still had some bad moments, but he's an elite scorer, probably an underrated playmaker, really good handles, has the ability to be one of these guys that just straight up catches fire. On-tuck Kyrie is a scary thing. We've seen him have moments where you just really can't contain him. I think you do have to put some credit into the fact he is a champion and he hit some big shots in that series, including the clinching shot of that NBA Finals. So I think that gives him some props. Obviously, there is a little scare with the baggage. Leadership was kind of an issue in Boston. There's some chemistry issues. You're kind of unsure. He's kind of a little bit indecisive. In your viewpoint, what are some negatives about Kyrie?
All those things you said. And I think that at the same time as well, can he lead a team by himself? I don't think he can. I think he can be a 1A, a number 2 guy. And, there's not many guys that can lead a team to a championship by himself. You got LeBron James, Stephen Curry, maybe. I think it's probably like maybe 3 players. It's LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard, and Kevin Durant in my eyes. I don't think there's anyone else in the league that you can say, put them on a team, you're going to get them to a top 4 seed and competing for a championship. Kyrie Irving probably gets you to a 5 or 6 seed by himself. You have the talent and pieces around him like he did in Boston, and then you are favored to get 67 wins, as Kory's buddy Bill Simmons said. And at the end of the day, I was pretty high on them as well in my preseason predictions. But I'm getting more and more worried by Kory Irving by the day as a Brooklyn Nets fan, because this thing is getting some real traction, and the friction with D'Angelo Russell. I'll save that for another day. But Kory Irving, he gives you a lot, but he also takes away a lot with the negatives that he does possess.
So I think first I'll start with the on-court weaknesses. Obviously, he's still not a great defender. He was better, but this is a guy who's still a little bit smaller. And then you're looking at also offensively, he's a guy to go out there and get you buckets, but he also has adapted that Kobe Bryant Mamba mentality in which he wants to be the guy to either win you the game or lose you a game. We saw that in the Milwaukee Bucks series, especially in that final closeout game where the Bucks won Game 5. He was, 2 for 13 or 1 for 13 the first half to start, just shooting his way out of it. And the one game after he shot like 23 times, he said, I should have shot more, which is that classic Kobe answer. So I think, that's also translates to the issue off the floor, is where he's just a little bit of a me guy. And a me guy in the sense of he wants everything to be his way. I almost just dropped. He's an Aries for zodiac sign, which means he's a little bit untempered. He's not really predictable. I had to throw that out there. I had to throw it out there. But he's actually has that personality of being unpredictable. I mean, in his time with Cleveland, they've mentioned where sometimes he would be really engaged, and then the next week he would not talk to anybody, would really seclude himself. So he's constantly got this turbulent nature in himself, where he's all of a sudden like buying in with the rookies for the Celtics, and then the next week he's bashing them. Then he was saying, well, we fixed it, we're working it through. Then it was constantly just a back and forth. So the biggest weakness with Kyrie is everything he brings off the court with the drama. Can he be the leader of a team? Can he be the guy that guys can turn to and lean on when things aren't going well, instead of being more of a catalyst when things are going wrong? So I think the off the court stuff is probably the biggest issue.
Yeah, and I think some of that comes with, if they do add another star wherever he plays with, can that other star maybe be more of the leader, or can somebody else in that team? It doesn't always necessarily have to be your best player. We talk about Draymond being the emotional leader for the Warriors and things along those lines. So I think that's probably the biggest concern with him. On the court, we'd all agree he's probably a top 3 point guard, right?
Yeah, yes. It's Steph, it's Dame, it's him. Is that yeah.
I mean, and there's an argument for him to be better than Dame. I'm not putting Westbrook in my top 3. If somebody wants to do that, that's not me.
No, I'm just making sure we're not forgetting anybody. But no, that seems right.
Yeah, and I mean, I think anytime you can add a player who's top 3 or top 5 at their position, he's going to bring your team to another level. Obviously, I think a little bit too on the Kyrie front. I'm not trying to defend him. The Cleveland situation in terms of overall chemistry in that locker room, I don't think was great. We saw it get a little bit more chaotic after he left. They brought in Dwayne Wade and all that stuff. Things didn't necessarily go well. And then in Boston, yeah, I think a lot of the blame goes to him, but there's definitely other reasons why things didn't work out in Boston. It wasn't just him. Obviously things didn't end that way, and that's a reason he wants to leave. We don't really know the details until it all breaks down, but talking about that, he probably is going to look for a situation where he can be one of the top players on the next team he goes to, and looking for a really good culture. So what are your top destinations? We'll get percentages after we determine top 4 destinations.
Brooklyn, and Brooklyn. I mean, I don't want it. I mean, okay, the Lakers are there.
You sound like Jon Snow. I don't want it.
Look, literally, you are my queen, Kory. You are my queen, my friend. I think that
so he's related? Damn.
I mean, at the same time, I think that the Lakers will be around there. I think you have to include Boston just because they've got his restricted free agency rights. Despite the fact that he opted out, he could still offer him the most amount of money, $40 million more. And money can talk in certain occasions. I don't think Kyrie Irving is a guy that necessarily thinks about money above everything. So for me, it's Brooklyn, it's New York, it's the Lakers, it's Boston / Clippers.
Yeah, I think the prime destination would be the Brooklyn Nets. We have too many rumors and too many guys coming out saying this is where he wants to be. He's constantly been in Brooklyn. There's been guys saying he's been around Barclays a lot. So I think Brooklyn would be the first destination. Post Anthony Davis trade, I would actually say the Lakers are second for me. And then third, there's always like a dark horse team. So I would say it's the Clippers probably.
The Clippers have said, I remember them tweeting, I can't remember where it came from, The Athletic or something, but they believe that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a foundational piece. I don't buy that because, we talked about on the free agency pod with Anthony Davis that, you wouldn't trade Jaylen Brown for Kawhi Leonard. Is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander ever going to be as good as Kyrie Irving? No. And if you can get Kyrie Irving and Kawhi Leonard, dear Lord, that would be insane. Imagine the Clippers and Lakers rivalry then. Man, that'd be insane.
Yeah.
And that's what I think it is for like Kyrie. I think he's really looking to probably pair with somebody or go to a really good culture. So that's why I think Brooklyn has some value to him, not only from the perspective of the young players and the possibility and, him being a New Jersey Nets fan growing up. I think that has an impact, but then you look at the performance team, how they've done really good with little players. Kyrie has an injury concern. He probably wants to get on that load management thing. The Nets can do that for him. And I think they can help try to change the perspective about Kyrie in such a negative light in terms of his leadership and chemistry. We know how things were so well for the Nets last year. Maybe that can kind of help Kyrie on a personal level. And like you guys mentioned, I think the Knicks are probably in the mix, but without KD, I think it looks a lot less enticing. I think if he goes to New York, he's leaning towards Brooklyn. Clippers are really my dark horse here because if they add Kawhi, like you mentioned, that's a really good combo. That's
an insane combination.
Yeah, that's, you could argue they could get themselves to a really, really high level, especially with some of the pieces they already have in that team with Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell, and then maybe add a couple more pieces. Then there's always a chance he comes back to Boston. I think now that they didn't get Anthony Davis, it looks a lot less likely. So I'm agreeing with you guys. I think Brooklyn's the favorite. If you had to put percentages on all the teams, what would you go with?
I'll go 60%, 70% with Brooklyn, 20% the Knicks, and then 8% Lakers and 2% Clippers / Boston.
Yeah, so I'll say as of right now, 65% Nets. I'll go 20% Lakers, which gives me
85.
Then I'll go 10% Clippers, 5%.
95. There we go.
Yeah, I'm going to go actually. I think I'm going to go with 7%. Nets ties. Mark's twin being the head of Rock Nation, who's a big part of the Nets organization. I don't think you really make that at this point, especially with the agent you've been with for a long time, unless you probably plan on joining Brooklyn. And Boston Herald reported this week that he plans on joining Brooklyn and coming from a really well-respected Boston reporter. So 70%, I'd probably go give me, I guess 10% for Boston and 10% for the Knicks. And that leaves me, with 5%. So then Clippers and Lakers each get 5%. But anything else you want to touch on Kyrie? Yeah, exactly.
I think that we'll go pretty in-depth with him on the Buzz. So make sure you subscribe to that one on iTunes too.
And that should be out after this one. So if you're listening live, you want an in-depth breakdown of Kyrie to the Nets, you could definitely check that out. Now, the second point guard in this free agent class, I don't think there's an argument for this. Actually, there probably is an argument, but Kemba Walker.
Kemba Walker is definitely the second best free agent in this, second best point guard in this free agency list. He had a sensational season. I remember the early points of the season where there was talk he was in the MVP race. Obviously, that tapered off as the success of the Charlotte Hornets did. He makes a team a somewhat contender with his talents. It's a meddling contender. It's not you don't get the same sort of ceiling you do with a Kyrie Irving or a Damian Lillard, but he is a star in his own right. And there will be, and he had a sensational season. Obviously, I think his size, he is insane at just being able to create his own shot, carrying the team on his back. He is one of the most offensively gifted guards in this league. He often goes unheralded, obviously playing out in Charlotte, but he's a regular all-star, an all-NBA. So he's going to finish with quite the resume at the end of the day. And, where he chooses to go, there's obviously after the AD rumors, we'll get into those destinations. It changes things a little bit, despite the fact that reports have been, as I mentioned on the last outlet, that his priority is the Charlotte Hornets, but he also intends to explore other free agent options. But $220 million compared to $140 million. I get paid a little bit at OGD basketball, but do I get $80 million, Nick, if I go to do some draft content instead of doing the Brooklyn Buzz?
Yeah, if you want to give me half of it, no.
Well, you're my rich Paul, my
dude. So I wish, but maybe one day. But thinking on Kemba's front.
I didn't hear that. What was the question?
Kory.
Kemba Walker is a player that we want to
what
hear
are you
you talk
thinking
about, Kory
Oh,
Waldron.
yeah, okay. There is next up. All right, yeah. Kemba Walker, obviously was tremendous this year for the Charlotte Hornets. The 60-point game sticks out, of course. The early MVP acknowledgement early in the season, obviously things tapered off near the end when the Hornets came back to being their usual. We're going to just miss the playoff selves. But Kemba can attack you in a lot of different ways, right? He can get to the rim. He can score off that lethal step back mid-range jumper he has. He's developed a really good three-point shot, which, as you remember, in his first couple of years, he just wasn't a good three-point shooter. That is a big part of his game now. Doesn't necessarily have to play on ball. Obviously, on the Hornets, he is a ball-dominant guy, but he can play a little bit off ball and kind of be a scoring guard for you. Defensively, you're not getting a ton, but we'll talk about his weaknesses in a second. But offensively, this is a guy who can beat you in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, he's a really good scorer. He can carry the offense for stretches, especially when it doesn't have to be the entire game. He can get super hot. We've seen teams throw weird-ass formations at him to try to slow him down, including the Nets threw a box and one at him. So he has the potential to get really hot. We haven't necessarily seen him ever play with really good players, so I find that interesting about Kemba. And just to drop his stats, 25, 6, and 4 on 43 and 35. Not amazing efficiency, but he didn't have much help with in that. And like Jack mentioned, not the biggest of players. You know, the size could be a little bit of an issue, especially with age, and depending a lot on his quickness. So some other.
Nick, you're breaking up, I think.
Yeah, I didn't hear you there, Nick. What was that last question?
What are some other weaknesses on Kemba?
I think the size thing was one thing we sort of talked about. Kory sort of mentioned, the defensive liabilities that he has too, and I think his ability to sort of be, the real upper echelon. He's never going to be, the 1A. We sort of spoke about with Kory. He's even in a lesser sort of tier. He's in like a tier 2 for the sort of point guards in this sort of league, and that doesn't necessarily take anything away. I think that when we're talking about fitting out a championship roster, he's 2A or 2B. And, when we speak about the Los Angeles Lakers, he's, 2B or like number 3, I guess, for a championship contending team in the Lakers. If he were to go to the Knicks, this is hypothetically, if Kevin Durant happened to be healthy and he would have been the number 2 guy there, I think that's a championship team as well, because Kevin Durant is so great. And I think Kemba Walker would be like a Kyrie Irving sort of LeBron combo there. So I think that the limits on his game aren't necessarily due to any skill. It's obviously a bit of size and the lack of defense and that sort of stuff. But I think he has a lot of positives in his game. I just don't think that he is, the elite upper echelon that is reserved for a very minor few in this league.
Yeah, I think his weaknesses come from, like you mentioned, Jack. I mean, a little bit undersized. Not the greatest of defenders. Can be a little bit handy and create some turnovers, but not necessarily a plus defender. And then you look at just the fact that his game, and this isn't necessarily a weakness, more like a long-term weakness, is that how does his game kind of develop when he loses his speed? But that's, we can talk about that on a different podcast. So really his weaknesses are the fact that he's just not a great defender. But offensively, like we said, he's more dominant offensively than he is defensively.
He's not overly quick. I don't think either. I think he's smart, and I think that a lot of I don't think quickness is the number one skill in this NBA. But if you're a point guard, obviously you look at guys like John Wall, De'Aaron Fox. It certainly does help you, but he doesn't have elite speed. Yeah,
he's shifty. When you're a little bit smaller, it's easier to move some of the other guys. I actually think he improved a little bit as a defender, being a little bit more pesky and just using his body to kind of get in between screens. Obviously, he's never going to be an elite guy in that field. But where would you rank him at his position? Fringe top 5 point guard?
Yeah. So we had our top 3. 4 would be Russ and then Kemba. Is that, I guess, the sort of minor consensus? I could make an argument that Kemba's better than Russell Westbrook right now, because I think that Westbrook is only going to get worse, whereas I think Kemba has maybe 2 more seasons at this level. And like we spoke about, he was an MVP contender for an albeit short amount of time. But to be an MVP contender in this league for any stretch of time makes you a real star in this league. So I think that he's top 4-ish.
Yeah, I think after last season, we're going to be doing our OTG top 50 player power rankings. You conclude the 2018-2019 season shortly, me and Jack. I probably would say he is a top 5 point guard. The case between him and Russell Westbrook, that's an in-depth conversation to have. But you look at other guys like Kyle Lowry. Like, does he edge up after this postseason? Maybe. Ben Simmons doesn't seem to be there yet. Ricky Rubio, D'Lo. I feel like all those guys are like the third tier. I think Kemba is easily a second tier point guard as of right now.
Yeah, I think there's an argument for a couple guys, and the Westbrook thing is interesting. Depending on like the peak level, when you see peak level Westbrook, he's really, really good. The problem is that he's not consistently at that level, and he makes a lot of dumb decisions.
I want to pop out a poll. I want to pop out a poll. Who would you rather have for next season, Russell Westbrook and Kemba Walker, and then check it at the end of the episode? Yeah.
Based off of NBA Twitter, I feel like they're going to go with Russell Westbrook.
Of course they will.
That's just my opinion, but. What are some destinations? Obviously, Charlotte seems like the most likely one. We mentioned the Lakers. Anywhere else popping up for Kemba?
I think the Knicks are one. Obviously, he has some ties to New York, the hometown sort of thing. I think we'll probably just mention the Clippers with almost everyone because they have that much space. Any team that has, a substantial amount of space, obviously, the Nets do have some space, but their allegiances lie elsewhere when it comes to the point guard sort of scenario. So I think that there's probably only a couple of teams. It seems to be a 2-team race right now, with the Knicks sort of, maybe waiting in the wings. But if I was Kemba, it's for me, it's the Lakers or Charlotte.
So actually I have a list of 5 teams for Kemba. Not necessarily all of them have been rumored as teams that I think could use Kemba. So first off, I think the Lakers now after today's report would be number 1. Number 2 for me would be the Pacers. I still think there's some kind of traction there, possibly, depending on how everything unfolds. I think Utah could be an interesting place if they want to finally go after a point guard who can score. I think Boston, because of everything that's happened, maybe they go looking for a point guard who's not Kyrie Irving, obviously. And then lastly, I agree with Jack. I think the Clippers, just because of how much cap space they have and what they're trying to build, would be a dark horse. Charlotte, of course, I think would be, so I guess 6 technically. So I think Charlotte is a possibility because when you have the ability to give somebody the super max and all that damn money, it's hard to turn that down. So those would be the 6 teams I think that are possible for Kemba.
Yeah, just name the rest of the league. No, I'm just kidding. If we're going the top 3 names: Hornets, Lakers, and Knicks.
Yep.
Kory, what are you thinking? Top 3: Lakers, Hornets, and Knicks?
Yeah, I would say Lakers, Knicks, Hornets.
Yeah, I'll go Lakers, Hornets, Knicks.
I actually think the Hornets are the most.
Yeah, I think that
Go ahead,
because Jack. Kemba seems to be that sort of hometown sort of dude. I think that, and he seems to have that sort of Lillard mentality to an extent, that sort of loyalty. And at the end of the day, loyalty can be increased by $80 million. Like $80 million is just like an unfathomable amount of money. Despite the fact that, yes, these guys make plenty of money on endorsements and such, but Kemba Walker isn't Kyrie Irving. He doesn't have his own shoe. He's not he is incredibly marketable, but he'd be more marketable in Charlotte as sort of a hometown guy, and go down as probably one of the best Charlotte Hornets of all time. I think Dylan has brought up the fact that he thinks that he already is the best Charlotte Hornet of all time, and obviously it's going to be interesting to sort of see how things sort of turn out. But if I'm going percentage wise, I think it's probably 60% Charlotte and 35% Lakers and 5% for the Knicks.
Yeah, I'd probably say 55% Hornets, 35% Lakers. So I'm at 90, and then I would say 5% Pacers because I think they're a dark horse too, and then 5% Knicks.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. I think that's good percentage. Like I said, I think the Hornets are probably the most likely one to be interesting if the Lakers can kind of sway him with a chance at a championship. Everywhere else, it's like, does he just want to play there? Now, getting into D'Angelo Russell, who I think is a player that's either overrated or underrated by a lot of different people. What would you view his skill set going to free agency? Obviously, he's a restricted free agent, so the Nets would have the opportunity to match any deal.
Yeah. For those that want really, really in-depth thoughts, make sure to subscribe to the Brooklyn Buzz. We did a season review for D'Angelo Russell. But yeah, he had a tremendous season. Obviously, first-time All-Star as an injury replacement. His passing is just absolutely gorgeous. He is off the dribble shooting, especially from the perimeter, and the rainbow shot, the teardrop floater. He was the real reason for when Caris LeVert went down, why the Brooklyn Nets were able to maintain any semblance of success and really get back to being a playoff team. He was the star, and obviously there's going to be plenty of teams that are clamoring for his services, the Indiana Pacers, but at the same time, it makes me sad to speak about D'Angelo Russell as a non-Brooklyn Net, and I think that because as fans we think irrationally about just the landscape of the NBA, and we can sort of speak more objectively about guys like Kemba Walker and players that aren't on our teams and we don't have ties to. But despite the fact that D'Angelo Russell, Kyrie Irving makes absolutely no sense, I don't want to lose D'Angelo Russell because he's been a part of the growth of this team, and it feels like we're so invested in him as fans, and it feels like he's been like such a huge part of the Brooklyn Buzz success as well, because we always see D'Angelo Russell fans commenting and joining in the discussions. So it's straying away from obviously the season overall. He's obviously a really bad defender.
Emotional on us right now.
A little bit. I'm getting in my feels. I'm going to put out a Take Care 2 album. I'll get Drake. I'll get Drake on it for you. But yeah, D'Angelo Russell is obviously a horrible defender, and that's basically his major weakness.
Yeah, I think the strengths for D'Angelo Russell, the fact that he can score. In a lot of different ways, right? He's got a little bit of a floater game. He can get to the rim. He can beat you a little bit off the dribble. He can shoot. He's got a clutch gene. He's willed the Nets to a couple of victories. The Charlotte Hornets comeback is the one that sticks out in my mind. The game-winning shots, the classic ice in the vein. So those are some of the strengths. And also, as you guys have mentioned a lot, he's an underrated passer. He can really find guys with some nice-looking bounce passes and everything else. The weakness is clearly his defense. And also, I say a weakness is just like shot IQ. He does take some bad shots, does force some bad shots at times. We saw that a little bit in that first-round matchup against the Philadelphia 76ers, where it looked like he was just kind of forcing his offense at times, a lot of fading away mid-range jumpers, which is just not a high-percentage shot. So that would be the main weakness. But again, this is a kid still. So the weakness is when it comes to shot IQ, you're not overly concerned about, because that just takes time from playing more and more NBA games, more and more film sessions. The defensive weaknesses, that's probably not going to go away.
Yeah, you guys pretty much nailed it. He's an offensive player. He can score at the three-point line. He can hit the mid-range shot. He can hit the floaters. Not necessarily great at getting to the rim and finishing at the rim or getting to the free throw line. Very good passer, excels in pick and roll, pick and pop as well. Like you guys said, defensively, he's never going to be a plus for him. He's slightly improved probably this season. He can still get better, needs to add more muscle, but at only 23, I think there's a lot of upside still there. And efficiency isn't necessarily amazing for him. I think that'd probably be one of my bigger concerns, is he hasn't yet to shoot, over 45% from the field or over 37% from three. So I think look for D'Lo to kind of pick up that efficiency. And like Kory mentioned, not only the bad shots, but some of the bad turnovers.
Yeah. A little bit careless at times.
Exactly. And it's the one turnover that it'll stick out to me for the rest of the time when D'Angelo Russell will be the turnover he had against. Yeah, exactly. But, throwing that pass at that time in the game where it isn't necessary and you had the win locked up and you pretty much just got your team a loss. Now, that's a rough one, but it's a learning experience for a young guy. Where does he sit in terms of his position?
Yeah, I think we touched on it a little bit in that sort of tier 3. You look at guys like Eric Bledsoe, Kyle Lowry. I think Kyle Lowry proved this postseason that he's probably at the head of that list now. I think that I value playoff success more than any other. And, despite the fact that D'Angelo Russell has youth on his side, you can chuck in guys like De'Aaron Fox as well in that sort of mark. Jamal Murray. It's really hard. It depends on what you value, subjectively as a basketball fan. I think D'Angelo Russell, we spoke about his skill set, his weaknesses, and his strengths. I think that he's in that sort of tier 3, top 10-ish sort of range, can push himself further because he hasn't reached his ceiling yet. But there are areas where he can improve, and he's not a finished product just yet, despite what a lot of people may think.
Yeah, I think he's in the 7 to 10 range, probably in top 10 point guards. I think Kyle Lowry would probably be 6 for me. And then we already mentioned, Lillard and Steph, Kyrie, Lillard, and Kemba probably being in the 5. Lowry just out, and then you could put D'Lo as high as 7.
You got Westbrook.
What? Westbrook is
too.
right. Westbrook too. Excuse me. I think Eric Bledsoe, the guy you could easily say D'Lo has nights where he's better than, because Eric Bledsoe is the same type of, you don't really know what you're getting on a nightly basis offensively. They kind of like flip, right? You don't know what you're getting defensively from D'Lo on a certain night, but you can almost guarantee on the offense. Whereas for Eric Bledsoe, you can almost know the defense will be there, but not necessarily the offense. I think that's kind of the range from the point guards from 7 to 10. Is they're guys who have something they're really good at, but nothing they do overly well, and they're still a little bit inconsistent.
I think another issue, we didn't bring this up for weakness. Sometimes D'Angelo has issues getting separation. The lack of quick foot speed, which impacts his defense, and that kind of what prevents him from jumping up. I think he's probably better than Eric Bledsoe because he can carry so much a load for you offensively, but he'd still probably be in that top 7 to top 10 range for me. But like we talked about, there's still a lot of opportunity for him to take another step. I think Jack and I talk about this on the Buzz a lot. Adding muscle for him is going to be huge, and I think it'll make him feel more comfortable getting inside. But right now, when he goes inside, he's a little bit soft because he's undersized in terms of weight.
Definitely.
Now, possible destinations for D'Angelo Russell. Jack, don't get too emotional on us on this.
No, Brooklyn Nets are still, for me, the front runners. We have his restricted rights, and at the end of the day, whatever another team offers him, we can match. But Indiana Pacers, the Utah Jazz, we spoke about, very, albeit, flippant fashion, but, the Los Angeles Lakers, the Minnesota Timberwolves. There's a lot of teams, the Phoenix Suns. D'Angelo Russell has a lot of suitors. He's a popular dude. He's a handsome man, very stylish. Obviously, GQ reflected that as well. And I want him in the black and white because I don't want my T-shirt jersey curse to be real.
So I think for me, my destinations, I think the Nets, until they have a different point guard signed, he is still obviously the lead guy for them to go back to with restricted free agency rights. So I would say the Nets, I would say the Indiana Pacers in the same line. I would also go with the Phoenix Suns as my third choice because there's that Devin Booker and D'Lo history. It seems like those guys are really good friends off the court, already been hanging out a few times. And then 2 dark horse teams. I've been having like a 5-team thing for every team. So my 2 dark horse teams would again be the Boston Celtics because they do have a question mark at point guard now. If Kyrie's not coming back, who are they going to get to fill those shoes? Is it really Terry Rozier? I don't think so. And then probably if you're looking, it would probably be a toss up between the Clippers and Minnesota Timberwolves. Timberwolves already had rumors, and then the Clippers. When you have that much cap space, if you miss out on some of these bigger names, maybe you take a chance on somebody who's a little bit younger and it actually kind of fits in with your timeline.
Landry Shamet, I think they'd be more happy with him than D'Angelo. I think that there's no point in offering money to a guy where you've got, the rights to Landry Shamet and you're building with him, and he's a lot cheaper as well. So I get it money-wise, and just sort of maybe, that's there's a tandem sort of fit there and building a young nucleus, but I think that they've got bigger fish to fry, just in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm going to pull a Kory, and I'm going to name a lot of teams. You're looking at the Nets. You're looking at the Knicks. I think if they strike out and they could kind of take a shot at the Nets by getting their quote-unquote young star and pulling him away if they sign Kyrie. You look at Orlando. You look at Phoenix. Minnesota has interest, but they would have to do a ton to make the money work. So I think there's, those teams. You guys mentioned Clippers and Lakers. I don't really see that as likely. The Pacers are a real possibility. I've seen people also mention the Bulls.
Man, imagine Zach LaVine and D'Angelo Russell. I mean, we talk about Kyrie Irving and D'Angelo Russell as a horrible defensive backcourt. Dear Lord, that would be yucky.
I think I actually really like him on the Pacers, or I really like, and I didn't mention Utah. I really like him on Utah or Indiana.
Those 2 teams, because Donovan Mitchell and Victor Oladipo have such great defensive abilities, it's almost just like a wonderful yin and yang. And
you got Turner and Gobert.
That certainly helps as well, having an elite rim protector. And obviously the Nets do have Jared Allen. He's nowhere near that range of being those 2 guys yet, a defensive player of the year candidates. But I love those sort of fits. But at the end of the day, I'm going to keep bringing this up because it's almost just like become an ethos of mine. I don't think that if your best player is a point guard or a shooting guard, unless they are transcendent, I think you need to have a wing in today's day and age to be your best player to win the championship. Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, Kevin Durant, We're looking at right now the best teams in the league. Maybe whatever you want to class, Giannis, whatever you want to class LeBron. But I think D'Angelo Russell, on a championship team, he's like the third best player. And I think that for the Pacers, for the Jazz, if they were to get him, yeah, it takes them up to that sort of next level. I think it would make the Pacers, a top 3 seed. It would make the Jazz, a top 3 sort of seed as well. But I don't think that it's going to beat them against, a Giannis Antetokounmpo-led team in the East, or a Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, or Jimmy Butler-led team, or a LeBron and AD team out in the West. It gives you a ceiling.
You didn't see his face. You didn't see his face. I'll just jump in real quick. I think with Utah, it's a little bit better fit because he could be their third best player. You have Gobert and you have Mitchell. Where I think if he's on the Pacers, Turner's probably better now, but maybe D'Angelo makes that jump. I'm not sure. I think D'Angelo could possibly get to being the second best player in a championship team. I wouldn't necessarily bet on it, but I don't want to rule it out as a possibility.
So I feel like you guys have both seen Breaking Bad?
Yep.
Yes.
So when the guy's in the wheelchair and he's like pressing the button before it explodes?
Yeah.
That's how I thought. So I think you're right to a degree, Jack, in the stance of like wings obviously are important. You have to have a top flight wing who can do both. He has to be a two-way wing to really dominate and to be true title contenders, I think. I think D'Lo, there's probably on a championship team. He's definitely not, I don't think you're first, at least not yet. Probably likely you're third. And on the Pacers, probably raises them to a 3 seed. But I think if D'Lo comes onto the Pacers in whatever form he's in, even if it's all-star D'Lo from this year, Victor Oladipo, who knows what he comes back as? That's probably the biggest question mark. How does that quad tear affect his career? But if he's healthy and then Miles Turner and Sabonis both take a jump, I don't think it's necessarily the worst combination for them to actually not necessarily need a top flight wing. Because if you have a defensive stud in Turner, the two-way ability of Oladipo with the scoring presence of a D'Angelo Russell, depending on what role players you bring in, I don't think a wing is necessarily needed from my perspective. But I think it'd be fun.
I think it would be fun on the Pacers just because of what he can bring, and there's still a lot of growth and a lot of unknown with him, and maybe not being re-signed by the Nets could give him a little extra motivation. But what would be your top 3 destinations for D'Angelo Russell?
Brooklyn, the Pacers, and the Jazz.
I would say, there's a lot of rumors with the Kyrie and the Nets. So I would say Indiana, Brooklyn, and then I would go with Phoenix as my third team.
Yeah.
Did I break up?
Yeah. What was the last team?
Phoenix.
Yeah, Phoenix is definitely – I think they might have to open up a little bit of cap space, but I'm going to go – this is really tough. I actually don't think the Nets are the favorite to retain D'Angelo Russell anymore, especially with – sorry, Jack. I just think Kyrie's almost a lock to sign with the Nets, and from a basketball perspective, it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to have Kyrie and D'Angelo Russell. And I know it hurts a lot of fans emotionally, but the Nets have done this – and I'm not taking away for anything that D'Angelo did for the Nets last year. This culture has been built up by 3 years. D'Angelo really only played 1 full season with the Nets. A lot of credit goes to other guys like Spencer Dinwiddie, Joe Harris, Jared Allen for the work they did too. So I think people are looking at D'Angelo Russell as he's done everything for the Nets, where I think it's been more of a group effort. So I think I guess the Pacers seem number 1 because they're the first team to come out and have real interest. Then I would look at Utah. I almost don't want to say the Nets are a top 3 destination. I want to say it's probably Orlando or Phoenix or another team, just because that's how it feels with the Kyrie thing. If Kyrie were not to sign, the Nets are number 1 and he's not leaving. But if Kyrie's to Brooklyn, I don't think we're going to see D'Angelo Russell back in a Nets uniform.
I don't like that. But I'll save my thoughts for the Brooklyn Buzz.
I mean, and let's just get Kory's perspective. What do you – I know I've asked you before on the Nets D'Lo and Kyrie pairing. If the Nets have opportunity to pair Kyrie and somebody else, it just makes a lot more sense than pairing D'Angelo Russell and Kyrie.
I don't think you need D'Lo if you're getting Kyrie. I think you ideally, depending on where you want to play Karis LeVert, but you want to go after a guy like even a Jimmy Butler or Tobias Harris. Ideally, probably Tobias Harris because you would rather have, I think, the floor spacing ability. But yeah, I don't think you want to lock up long-term money in 2 guards who are both just not very good defensive guards as is. I just don't think that's a recipe for winning a title if you have those 2 ball-dominant guards playing side by side. I think that's just problematic.
And the real question is, how many things does D'Angelo Russell do better than Kyrie Irving, or will
Not
do
many.
better?
And the thing is, what I sort of think is that Kyrie doesn't lift you that much greater to what D'Angelo Russell does. I honestly don't think that. Despite the fact that we spoke about ceiling and skill set, and obviously he's a top 3 point guard, I don't think if we had, say, Kyrie Irving on our team this season, we would finish with more than an extra 4 wins, 5 wins, maybe. I don't think it gives us a championship ceiling. Like I get, and I mean, if championship is the end goal, I think you just get the assets and you make it work, and then at the end of the day, you can trade them. I don't think if you have D'Angelo Russell on a sort of near maxish deal, I think the Phoenix would still be interested. I think Indiana would still be interested. I think Utah would still be interested, because I don't think those guys are going to be getting any free agents anyway, because they're not destination teams. They might want to get like a Tobias Harris like in Utah, but that'll be for the small forward sort of podcast. But for me, Kyrie Irving doesn't flip the wheel, change the pendulum that much, whatever. The saying apples and oranges, it's literally apples and maybe like pink lady apples with like Granny Smith apples.
Well, I think what Kyrie does do, though, is he makes you more attractive for another star. There's just a bigger possibility.
But is that really going to happen? Like, I get that it does.
But
like,
Sean Marks made the trade to open up the space for a reason. Like, he didn't make
so did the New York Knicks with Kristaps Porzingis. It doesn't necessarily. I get it, and like I get the thinking and the logic, and I like it, because Alan Crabb is a nothing anyway, and you add Torian Prince, and we've spoken about that deal. But I don't think that it's fait accompli that if we get Kyrie Irving, we're getting Kevin Durant, Tobias Harris, whoever it might be. If we get Kyrie Irving and Tobias Harris, then I guess it's better than having just D'Angelo Russell. But it's still not necessarily, the best deal that we could have gotten with Kyrie Irving and Kawhi Leonard. And obviously KD's injury really throws a spanner in the works. It seems to me that, they're still communicating. Obviously, they're still our close friends, and I don't know whether the Brooklyn Nets are still willing to offer that sort of 4-year max contract that they can, because you're betting on Kevin Durant getting back to his best, and you're betting on just 1 year of Kyrie leading the team. It's not necessarily the worst idea, but I don't think that Kyrie Irving is necessarily going to. It's lock it in that he's going to get a second free agent to come with him. Anthony Davis is a Los Angeles Laker now. If it's Kyrie Irving and then Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, Jared Allen, Joe Harris, and the rest, then the Nets aren't going to be that much better than we were last season. And there's a lot of recipe that could mess with the chemistry that we've built up and culture, blah, 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 and that I've spoken about on the Buzz before, that I don't think we're going to be that great. And these thoughts are probably going to be repeated on the Buzz and then some.
Yeah, I agree. I think we'll probably dive deeper in the Buzz, but I think it gives you the opportunity of signing Kyrie and D'Lo's more of a backup plan in that situation, where maybe you get a Jimmy Butler, or there's even been some speculation about a Kawhi joining up with him. Obviously, there are some ties for Kawhi in Brooklyn with some of the former Spurs people, but enough on D'Angelo and the Nets. This is a point guard podcast. Getting over to who is our 4th point guard of this class is Malcolm Brogdon.
Malcolm Brogdon is the prototypical role player you want to have as your point guard in today's NBA. The guy who can play next to your stars and fit better than probably any other guy. And he's going to get himself a nice payday thanks to a really healthy postseason. He can shoot, he can defend, he can hit a bucket, he can pass. He is he's a rookie of the year. I mean, he is a rookie of the year when Joel Embiid played like 28 games or something like that. But Malcolm Brogdon had a sensational season and proved himself on the biggest of stages as well. And I think that Milwaukee need to retain him, but there will be some teams claiming for his services. And if I'm the Lakers, I don't know how smart Rob Pelinka is, or if he's even heard of Malcolm Brogdon, but I'd be making some calls to John Horst.
Malcolm Brogdon is an interesting guy because of the age. Obviously, he's had some injuries over the course of the last couple of seasons, which is a little bit of a red flag. But more or less, when you get Malcolm Brogdon, you're getting a guy who can score. He can hit the 3-point shot. Had really good numbers this year, if I recall, like career numbers from the field.
50, 40, 90 season, I believe.
Yeah, which is very rare for guards. And then you also have the fact that he's a very, very good defender, probably the best defender of any of the point guards in this top 5, arguably.
I think that's a fair point. I don't think anybody's better than him defensively out of the guys we talked about today.
Right. So I think that's the one thing you're looking at for Brogdon. offense. And then still, this is a guy who's got a long way to go still in development. He's kind of been the third to fourth option in Milwaukee, with Antetokounmpo and Middleton being the 1 and 2. You can make a case that he's 3 and Bledsoe's 4, but I think this past year it was definitely Bledsoe 3 and Brogdon 4. So I think you could even see his numbers go up depending on the role he's given. But he's got a lot of strengths, man. He's just does everything right, and he's just, I love Brogdon. He's one of my favorite free agents.
Yeah, he's a great two-way player. He's still restricted free agent, so the Bucks can match any offer. Obviously, they have money tied up to Eric Bledsoe already. Like you guys already mentioned, though, he does a lot of good things to your team. He understands basketball at a high level. I'm not really sure how much better he can get, though, because I believe he's up there in age in terms of like 25 or 26. He could probably make a little bit of a jump. The only concern I would probably have with Malcolm Brogdon would maybe be a team slightly overpaying him and asking him to be in a bigger role, because I think the role he's in with Milwaukee, maybe a little bit bigger role he could be better in, but I think he's just perfect as that support type player, not necessarily somebody you're looking to depend on to create your offense for long stretches of the game. He can kind of lead a bench unit, but I don't think he's like your starter that's creating for everybody.
Yeah, I think his floor is really high, and and his ceiling isn't that high, but the gap between those two, which I think is what you want. You want as a sort of starting point guard or leading a second unit. He fit well in so many teams. There's obviously not everyone can be a superstar in this league, and you need guys to fill out the roster in lots of different ways. And Malcolm Brogdon has a really diverse skill set. He doesn't do a lot of things badly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you look at him as you don't want to be your first or second best player, but he's in that third or fourth role, or more so that fourth role. I think you're feeling really good about what he can do for your team. What are some destinations for Malcolm Brogdon? I think he's a really interesting free agent because there hasn't necessarily been a ton of chatter about locations for him.
Every destination we have mentioned already basically should be interested in Malcolm Brogdon. The top of my list would be, the Los Angeles Lakers and the Phoenix Suns. And then probably the Milwaukee Bucks. Obviously the Milwaukee Bucks, I think they need to endeavor to keep him, because we saw in the postseason him outplay a guy that they now have tied up to some pretty extensive money. Not the worst contract, but still a decent chunk of salary cap in Eric Bledsoe, who hasn't been able to prove it on the postseason on the biggest stage, whereas Malcolm Brogdon certainly has. So if I was another team, I would offer not necessarily a substantial number like Nick was sort of alluding to. You don't want to overpay a guy like him because he doesn't have, if you're looking at Eric Bledsoe, the money that he's on, that's probably, the real tipping point when it comes to a guy like Malcolm Brogdon. But, the Phoenix Suns, we spoke about that the Los Angeles Lakers have a near max money. If you get Malcolm Brogdon and some other pieces, not necessarily horrible. Obviously, you would rather have Kemba Walker, but as your plan B, there's some flexibility there. And yeah, if I was the Bucks, I would endeavor. I think Malcolm Brogdon needs to be obviously the plan B behind, re-signing Chris Middleton, because he is super important to their success. And I think that they have a championship nucleus in what they have now. Another year together, another year of tinkering. I think that the Milwaukee Bucks could be a championship contender next year, with Giannis getting a little bit better too, and Malcolm Brogdon continuing his steady play. If he averages even slightly less than 50, 40, 90, he's still going to be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, Brogdon's an interesting. Eric Bledsoe was kind of like fool's gold, right, in the regular season. We got this really nice stretch, and then he gets the 4-year, $70 million deal, which at time felt like a steal. But then after the playoffs and knowing that you have to bring back Middleton and Brogdon, it kind of feels like a negative, not a steal anymore. I think realistically, if you're the Bucks, you can't afford to lose Brogdon. This is a guy you drafted. This is a guy who won Rookie of the Year. Granted, it was a really weak draft class, and Embiid only played 34 games and nearly won the Rookie of the Year even still. But I think Milwaukee would probably be the top spot still, because I don't, like Giannis said, bring everybody back. Don't lose anybody. Will they pay the luxury tax, though? That's probably the different question. And then you look at other teams. I think the Indiana Pacers probably have him on their draft board, on their free agency board. I think the Lakers are another team that probably will look at him because the defense is what sticks out. A lot of these teams are going to need defense and three-point shooting. 3-and-D is one of the most critical aspects of an NBA player, and he is exactly that. So the Lakers, I think Phoenix could be in play for him. We know their struggles at the guard position of trying to pair someone who can give give Devin Booker some ease and play some defense, really. That'd be like the best combination. And then there's dark horses. Does Minnesota take a flyer on him? Does Orlando maybe want to move him out of 2 guard? Because Brogdon can really play the 1 or the 2. He's kind of played more so the 2 guard role in Milwaukee since they have Bledsoe. But those are probably my shorthand of destinations.
Yeah, I think you guys mentioned the Bucks, the Lakers, the Pacers, the Suns. I actually think Dallas might not be the worst spot for him either because, any place where he doesn't necessarily have to be the number one creator, where he can be more of that support creator, the secondary creator, and they have Luka there. That's why I think it would be really nice with Devin Booker. I think he'll end up getting paid. I think he might get a slight overpay, but I don't mind slightly overpaying somebody who does a lot of things and understands their role. And it seems like he's a good chemistry guy too. But anything else on Brogdon before we move on? All right. Well, I don't even want to say there's like a 5th best point guard of this class because I was looking at, Terry Rozier. You got Rozier, you got Rubio, you got Rose, you got Payton, you got Beverly, you got Rondo, Collison, Joseph, Ish Smith. Who would be your 5th best point guard of this class?
Can you say that? I'd say probably Beverly. There's just something I like about his grit, something about his role player. Really nice defender. Obviously, the whole Kevin Durant series against the Golden State Warriors was a lot of fun. I thought it was a lot of fun. I remember watching the games with you guys at the bars in Poughkeepsie. Am I saying it right? Don't ask me to spell that either. But don't ask me to spell that. By the way, I can barely spell Melbourne. But I think that Patrick Beverly. We spoke about teams with Malcolm Brogdon. Patrick Beverly would have a similar list of suitors. From the Los Angeles Lakers to the Phoenix Suns. He's been rumored to be with the Phoenix Suns, for a couple of years now. And I think he would be a nice pairing, alongside Devin Booker, any sort of defensive sort of guard there. But, Kory Joseph, not necessarily, but I think that Beverly, because he's been able to prove it on a stage, has some history behind him. I spoke a little bit about floor and ceiling. There's not a high ceiling, but there's a very high floor with Patrick Beverly. You know what you're going to get. You're going to hit a few 3-pointers. You're going to get some real gritty physical defense, and you're going to get a really great teammate that gives you some real passion and real emotion, which I think adds a lot of value as well.
So I'm going to give you 3 names for the 5th spot, and they're all different in what they focus on. So first you have Patrick Beverly, who if you're looking for a defensive guy who can play defense and be a little bit of a ball handler and facilitator, that's your guy. If you're looking for offense, I think it's Darren Collison, a guy who can really shoot the 3-pointer, is probably an above-average playmaker. And then lastly, if you're looking for somebody who's young, he maybe develop, it'd be Terry Rozier. So I think those are probably the next tier of point guard you're looking at because they all give you something different. And then it's kind of like a drop-off when you get to Ricky Rubio and some of these other guys who have clear deficiencies in their game.
Yeah, I think you look at Pat Bev as a guy that could probably help you the most now because you know what you're getting in the toughness and the experience he kind of brings. You mentioned Collison. I think he's an interesting guy. I think he's best as kind of a bench guy, adds that spacing. Then, Rozier's a weird situation. He kind of came out and said some things necessarily positive, like he can't wait to get out of Boston, lost all leverage in that situation, kind of complained a little bit about not having enough minutes. But in any time he got in the game, he took a ton of shots. His efficiency was really bad this year. I think he was a little bit overhyped last season, especially during the playoff run where you look at his home and road numbers. But a team might take a chance on him, so I could see that as well. It's like you guys mentioned, it's a pretty big drop-off after that, though. Anybody else you want to discuss in terms of the point guard class? Anything you want to say about Rubio, Rose, Payton, Rondo, or Joseph?
Nah.
Just that Derrick Rose, I could definitely see getting a slight overpay, depending on how some of these guys land.
I would, and slightly touching on Ricky because I love his hair and I love his beard. Chicago, give him a call.
Ricky's got an A1 beard. I'll give him that.
He's sexy.
And whenever hair does it, honestly, always looks good. It's kind of crazy. But
I need them products. My hair's getting a bit long myself. Obviously.
Can't say the same about his jump shot, though. But I think the other guys are all kind of backups. I like Kory Joseph. Kory's obviously watched a lot of him. I think he's a good backup role, gives you a little bit of defense there. Payton actually, when he was healthy with New Orleans, had some good moments too. Not necessarily your starter, but I think all those guys we just kind of touched on are all backups. Anything else in terms of the point guard market? Do you guys want to give final predictions for all the point guards, at least the top 4 we discussed, or where you think they'll land?
Yeah, let's do it.
Kyrie Irving.
Brooklyn.
Yes, that's what I like to hear. Then Kemba Walker.
Charlotte.
Lakers.
Hey!
This is tough. I feel like the loyalty, this is so tough. It's like, does Kemba want a championship? Does he want to make a lot of money and just stay in Charlotte and have kind of, I don't want to say an easy life, but it's not like a lot of pressure. Part of me feels like Kemba might not be that guy and he's going to stay in Charlotte. And he just wants to play for one team his whole life. Now, D'Angelo Russell.
Brooklyn.
Indiana.
Oh, shut up.
Oh, man. I think this is tough. Part of me thinks like D'Angelo kind of wants to go to like a bigger market. So that like makes me a little bit less enticed with Indiana and Utah.
I don't really think he goes, to be honest with you, but we never get free agents.
Really?
But since we're around these names, I have to say it. I actually feel like Phoenix is probably where, like, if I'm being unbiased, I think Phoenix is where he ends up, simply because if he doesn't get matched by Brooklyn, he's just going to go play with his best friend.
Jordan Clarkson just tweeted that out as well.
I think Phoenix as well. We know how important relationships are. They've been talking about wanting to play together. Now they have two of them there. Karl Anthony Towns is the third part of that trio. Maybe he tries to force a trade or signs next time he's a free agent, which is a long time from now. But I think Phoenix is probably the most likely spot. Then I'd say Indiana and Utah, but Phoenix is my favorite. Now, Malcolm Brogdon.
Milwaukee.
I don't think they'd let him go.
Same thing here. He's the one guy you really got to keep after Middleton, like Jack mentioned earlier. I think you can afford to maybe lose Brook Lopez, but you try to retain him. I think the guy you kind of let go of is Mirotic.
Yeah.
But that's for another day. Any other guys you want to predict, or we're good?
We're good. I think the other guys are too unpredictable at this point.
Yeah. I'm actually really intrigued to see which team kind of screws up and overpays Terry Rozier. But that's just my opinion.
Chicago Bulls, right?
I could see it. Or the New York Knicks. I'd be kind of happy. But that's for another day. Guys, as always, a pleasure talking hoops with you. Thank you, everybody, for listening, checking in the chat. And like we mentioned earlier, do a live Brooklyn Buzz after that. And we'll be dropping shooting guards, small forwards, power forwards, centers later in the week. So check that out.
Peace out, knuckleheads.